Hello, I'm Sean Dry, history faculty member at Oakland Community College. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how to run a HyFlex class session. In a previous video, I went over how to design a HyFlex course. And in this video, I'm going to be talking specifically about one approach to HyFlex, which is giving your students the option to come to either an in-person class meeting or attend via a Zoom session that is happening synchronously. So those are the two participation options that you are offering your students. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how to run such a session. I like to think about this as preparing for three different phases of activity. There's the before class preparation, and then there's doing the actual class session itself, and then what happens after that class session is over. The prep for a HyFlex class session can be pretty daunting sometimes. There are some basic things that you need to do, like just make sure your students who are going to attend by Zoom know that how to get to that Zoom session and communicate that Zoom link frequently and redundantly. One thing that can help is if you just use the same Zoom link for the entire semester, so that way they don't have to remember or access a different link every time. The link is the same. You'll want to do things like set up some polls. The Zoom polls are pretty easy to do on the fly, but the more of the polls that you have set up in advance, the better. The big bit of work is you want to make sure that whatever materials you're going to be sharing with your students during class, that you have versions of those materials that are accessible. If you're doing an in-person and a Zoom session at the same time, then you're going to want to have digital versions of your materials and physical versions of your materials. So for example, I teach history and we do a lot of primary source work in our classes. And so then what I need to do is if I'm having a particular primary source document that I know our students are going to be looking at and talking about, then I will need to have a physical copy of that, but then a PDF or a Word doc copy of it in a digital form that I can share with my Zoom students too. And you want to make sure that you have all of that digital material preloaded to D2L before the class session comes around. One of the reasons why I do this is because I've heard from some students who attend class via Zoom that if I try to share a document with them on the fly in the chat window, some students can't access that, maybe because they're doing a mobile device or maybe because they're using an Apple product, and sometimes Apple products can't download those things. So if you have everything on D2L in advance, then during a class session, you can just point your students to that D2L site, and then they can access things easily that way. So running a good HyFlex session means that you do need to do some preparation ahead of time. The session itself is where, of course, the rubber meets the road and where you really have to think about what things are going to look like. I like to use the terminology Zoomers and Roomers. So my Zoomers are my students who are attending class by Zoom. My Roomers are my students who are there physically in the classroom. Something that really helps to keep the students together. So one thing you're going to want to try to do is rather than have two separate meetings, one meeting for the people who are there, physically, and then one meeting for people who are on Zoom, you want to try to integrate those students as much as possible. Get them to interact with each other and feel like they're part of the same class experience. A big way to do that is to have your Zoom session up on the overhead screen. So that way that people who are in the classroom can see them. You also want to strongly encourage your Zoomers to have their cameras on. Having those black boxes on that overhead site, not super helpful, but if they do have their cameras on, then that's great. And I totally understand there are all kinds of comments now about how some students just can't do that. Some students can't have their cameras on. They don't have the technology to do it. They don't have a camera on whatever item that they're using, or they don't have the bandwidth, or they're in a situation where they don't want people to see where they are. I totally understand that. As much as possible, it really, really helps for Zoomers to have their cameras on. So I like to use the terminology of inviting them to do that. Chat is going to be your lifesaver. The more and more people who are utilizing the chat window, that provides a really great opportunity for Zoomers and Roomers to engage and interact with each other. Strongly encourage your Zoomers to use the chat, to make comments in it, to ask questions, to reply to the prompts that you give. The more people that utilize that chat, the better. And you can also provide that chat as an option to your roomers who maybe have some anxiety issues and don't want to speak out loud. So you can tell your roomers, hey, log into the Zoom session and you can type your comments into the chat as well. So that way they're there physically, but if they want to communicate and contribute to the classroom conversations, then they can contribute through the chat window. I again, like to try to get my roomers and Zoomers to be talking to each other and engaging with each other as much as possible. One way that I do that is I get my roomers to say, hey, keep an eye on the chat in that Zoom session. And if I miss something, if there's a question that somebody asks or a comment that somebody makes, let me know. So that way they're interacting with each other. As an instructor, what's important for me to do is to make sure that I'm making eye contact with both my roomers and my Zoomers in turn. So sometimes I deliberately look at and talk to the people who are in the classroom, but then other times I want to make sure that I look directly into the camera and say comments and say things directly to the Zoomers. So just try to keep both of those groups feel like you're engaging with them, you're connected with them. I know there are a lot of opinions about the cold call idea, right? Just calling on a student to ask a question. That can be helpful to bring Zoomers back from whatever they may be distracted by. My recommendation, and what I've seen a lot of people talk about in the literature, is just if you're going to do cold calling, make sure you provide a pass option. So if I call on somebody, they should know they do have the option to say pass. But even that brings their attention back to what's going on. As I said before, you want to be sharing documents in chat. You want to be directing people to the D2L site. And that's all better if you have that set up in advance. A really important tool that can break up monotony and recapture the attention of all of your students is the Zoom poll feature. Polls are awesome. Just even short little questions, multiple choice questions that get people just redirecting their attention back to what's happening. Both of my roomers and my Zoomers just love the polls and the exit ticket surveys that I give them after every class session. They talk about how those polls are just really helpful in bringing their attention back to what's going on. Small group discussion is really powerful as well. And how you do this can vary from one place to another. The really easy thing to do is whenever you're assigning people small group activities and conversations to have, you can put your Zoomers in their own Zoom breakout rooms, and then you can have your roomers get into small groups themselves. You give them both the same directions, or maybe you mix up what you have each group do, but have them go separate and have their conversations on their own, and then bring them back to share. This could be part of a think, pair, share activity. If you get ambitious, you can try mixing your Zoomers and your roomers in the same small group. This requires a little bit of setup. What this requires is in each small group, for one roomer to be in each small group, one roomer in a small group log into the Zoom session. So when a roomer logs into the Zoom session, then you can assign Zoomers to that small group that they are in, and then each of those groups can have conversations. And then that way you've got roomers and Zoomers in the same small group talking to each other. You do have to be careful with the mute settings and the volume settings so that you don't get feedback, but if you play with them, then you should be able to figure that out. And again, that's something to maybe try once you feel comfortable with the small group environment of having them be in their own breakout rooms. What's important for small group activity is for people to have an opportunity to report or to share things that they're doing. One thing that you can use to have your Zoomers report is the Google Jamboard experience. It's a pretty cool feature where people who are virtual can just either type things into that Jamboard, or they can post sticky notes with comments that they have. So that's a fun way to get people to report. You can just open up a shared Google document and have people share things that way, or they can share a report in the chat. You can either have your roomers log into that Jamboard or log into that Google document and report or share there, or your roomers can report on the whiteboards that are in the classroom. So again, you're providing your students with the opportunities to come in either way, either come physically in the classroom or virtually via Zoom. The trick is to try to create as engaging and as interactive of an experience for both sets of your students, so that they both feel like they have the opportunity to achieve the learning outcomes of that day. The last thing to do whenever you're running a class session, make sure that you take pictures of anything that is up on the whiteboards. Notes that you have put up on the whiteboards, or reporting that your roomers have done. Take photographs of those and save a copy of your chat. One thing that can really help you with saving a copy of your chat is if you can adjust your Zoom settings so that Zoom automatically saves a copy of your chat whenever you close out the session. And then finally, when you're wrapping up class after the session is over, it's a really good idea to post those photos to your D2L site so that the Zoomers can access them and the roomers can access them as well. And also after class, if you're so inclined, you can review the chat log that you saved just to see who participated or who didn't. And you can look at the poll reports. Zoom has that ability to create a report of the polls that you share with students and see who voted in them and who didn't. That all is just in case you are a person who is utilizing some sort of participation grading or engagement grading in your class, or if you just want to keep track of who is being engaged and who isn't. So that's how a HyFlex class session works. Those are some of the tricks and tips that I've discovered along the way. And if you would like to find out more about how to do this, I have this shared document of resources that you can explore. Lots of great articles and websites and podcasts that you can listen to about how to run a good HyFlex class session. So thank you for joining me, and good luck on your HyFlex adventure.